This episode is proudly sponsored by Ramset, manufacturer and supplier to the Australian construction industry for over 70 years. Started in Australia, still in Australia, staying in Australia.
Welcome back to another episode of the Built Different podcast, the podcast for tradies that are built different. Brought to you by HIA, this is the show where you get to hear about what it takes to make it in the building and construction industry. So, Simon, last week was Are You OK Day.
Yep.
And, you know, we know that tradies are always checking in on each other on site, but they're not always the best at checking in on themselves. So I think today is, a really good chance to talk about having the tools to build mental fitness before you actually need them.
Yeah, it's really important. It is, we do know there are some stereotypes out there that tradies do struggle to communicate to each other and look after their mental health. So, we want to be part of that and, help that conversation forward in a positive way. And hopefully today you can get some tools that can, help you identify, if you are struggling and what you kind of can do about it. So, as you kind of mentioned, it was Are You OK Day this week. So just a little reminder that to check in with your mates and a couple of things you can do. Just, ask, are you okay? Listen to them, what they have to say, encourage action, and just check in. Mm-hmm. So that's the big thing there. But we have today in the studio with us, Coach Huey.
Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, gents. A nice little setup you have here.
Thank you. Yeah, we're excited to have you here, mate. Because this is a very important topic, and we know you've done a lot of great work here, and we can't wait to hear about your story and how you can, bring that to life and hopefully get that conversation flowing with a few of our listeners.
Yeah, definitely. I've learned a few things the hard way, so it's good to give them back to the guys before they have to, or at least they know what's coming and how to help manage it. So yeah, I'm looking forward to the conversations that this will bring up for people.
Excellent. Awesome. Probably first of all, do you just want to tell us about what you do now for as Coach Huey?
Yep.
And then we'll jump back and hear a little bit about your backstory and how you got to where you are today. So, what's your, what do you do now professionally?
Yeah.
And we'll take it from there.
Yeah. So pretty much I'm a wellness and a personal development coach for tradesmen. And I named it that specifically because it's a life coach, but as soon as you mention the word life coach, people kind of step back because of what comes with being a life coach. Mm-hmm. But with tradesmen, it's working with them to understand why they do the things that they do. Mm-hmm. A lot of guys have never been taught why they do these things, whether it's repeating bad relationships, whether it's, drug addiction, alcohol, or just not understanding themselves because, they've never been taught and you don't know what you don't know. Mm. So now I work with them to build their personal development, to, build their resilience, build their bit more knowledge about themselves, but also about what they want for later in life. Most tradies will live week to week because that's what, essentially that's what we get paid. If you're a subby, or if you're on site. So it's working with them to give them a bigger outlook on what they can do for themselves, how they can manage their stress and anxiety, not only on site, but also at home. Mm-hmm. Because, we all know a grumpy tradie, and if you don't know one, that means you are the grumpy tradie. And having been one of them myself, it's not a fun place to be, especially when you're taking that home. So I work with the guys on a one-on-one level, but also going into sites and offices and, doing
great
presentations just to let the guys know that, look, this is my services out there. We have a lot of these places that do like 2-hour talks. The talk's great. It raises awareness. Mm-hmm. But when the guys go back to site or they go back home and, life starts getting to them, they don't know who to go to. So that's kind of like where I bring myself in to help them.
Yeah.
As well as, things like this, just speaking, raising awareness for the lads and like keynote speaking. So yeah, they're my main three things, but really just having conversations because it's the simplest form of getting things fixed.
It's great to have that time where you can have that conversation and have a time to reflect and think about, what is going on in your life and assess, how you are, how you're doing mentally and if you need to make any changes or adjustments to, the way you're, tackling work or tackling things at home. What's causing you grief or stress or, so you can get yourself back on the right track.
And so it's, an interesting service that you provide because, there are many mental health services out there, but they're dealing with, crisis mode, right? And when it's, you're in the middle of a crisis, whereas you're really not, you're dealing with it much earlier.
Yeah, well, that's the intent. So it's ideally, I'd like to get to guys before they hit a wall, so that they've got the skills, the tools, the techniques to help with their anxiety, with their anger management, with all of that. Or on the flip side of that, once they've hit that wall, and they've been to one of the other services out there to get them back on a level of, okay, I'm in a good space. Then I take them from there. Okay, where do you want to go from here? Like, what do you want to build?
Yep.
How do you want to improve your life? Because it's all well and good getting someone to a safe level space where they're not thinking about taking their own life, or they're not excessively drinking, but it's like, where do they go from there? Like, what stops them falling back into that habit and that routine? And that's one of the things I do with the guys, is show them where this pattern came from and how to change it, and how to implement an improved pattern, one that's gonna, whether it's switching out alcohol for non-alcoholic beer, or going to the gym instead of going home to sit on the couch, whatever it may be. It's again, these things I learned them the hard way, because no one on site ever spoke about this. As an apprentice back home in Scotland, I never heard anything about it. My 12 years being here as a tradie and a site manager, it was the odd thing, but not to the level of what I found when I started actually coaching in the tools that I was being taught by these professionals. Like, I was like, okay, there's something here. I need to give this back to guys who 50, 60-year-old tradies who go home to a six-pack and a dog because they've got failed relationships. Their kids don't want anything to do with them, just because they don't know how to fix it.
Okay, well, so before there was Coach Huey.
Yes.
You're a tradie.
Yes.
So, want to tell us about your journey from being a chippy, moving through into where you are now.
Yeah, so it was like I said, I learned some things the hard way. So it was a bit of a dark transition, let's say. So I was a chippy back home in Scotland, came here, living the dream in Australia. Like,
how old were you when you moved out to Australia?
26.
Yep.
So I've been here 12 years now, so I'm giving away my age.
And side note, how are you coping with the Australian summers?
Love it.
Yeah,
love
good.
It. Absolutely love it. Like,
plenty of sun cream.
My last winter back home was -14. I was working outside on a school building with like 3 or 4 layers, gloves. You can't hold your hammer, and my van broke down. So I'm sitting inside my van, fully clothed, inside a sleeping bag. And I remember saying to the guy who I was working with, I can't wait to get away from this.
Wow.
So I would happily sweat all day in the sun. I'll take sunburn over frostbite any day.
Oh, here you go, like me coming from Queensland. Like, anything below 20 degrees, I start getting cold.
Yeah. But it's quick. It's you acclimatise quick. Let me tell you that much. Like, it gets a little bit cold here. I'm like, I need to put a jacket on. People back home are like, oh, what temperature is it? Oh, it's a bit chilly today. It's 16, and they're like, are you kidding me? We'd get the barbecues out if it was 16 degrees back home. So yeah. But,
all right, so 26 when you came out to Australia.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I was out here, me and my ex-wife now. 2 Scottish kids living the dream, backpacking, not a care in the world. And then we decided that we would stay here for good and would have kids. So we had our first daughter. I moved up into site foreman role by this time, so running the team of guys. And then we found out that we were having our second kid. And then the next day we found out that we'd lost a friend back home. And being this far away from it, it kind of feels like it wasn't really happening. But, I spent about a year before we went back home to Scotland. By this time he had been buried. There was a whole lot of stuff in the news about him. There was a whole lot of stuff going on back home in social media. So there was it's almost like a disconnect. And then that year we went back, it's when it hit me. Like, I was standing over his grave and I was like, okay, he is actually gone. It's not like I just haven't spoke to him. Yeah. So then we came back to Australia and my mental health just went down the pan.
Yep.
Like, I couldn't think straight. I was really aggressive. I was really snapping at the least little thing. Taking out my wife and my 2 kids by this point. I was known as the Angry Scotsman on site. I was the smallest, just it was a whole load of things. And it was my ex-partner said to me, she's like, you need to go and speak to someone. And being a typical man, I did, but it wasn't for
so nice to have someone
later.
around you to kind of give you that nudge in that right direction.
Yeah. Well, it's, and thankfully I eventually listened to her. Like, it took a while. Like, I'd put it off, and then I'd come home at nights and I was having chest pains, I was having back pains, I couldn't think, like, a whole load of stuff, and I was like, this just isn't right. So I went to the doctor and, did the standard thing of what they do. They give you the 10-question mental health plan. Yeah, okay, here's medication, go and speak to somebody. So I did all of that for the first time round, and what they told me was I wasn't depressed, but I was grieving for the loss of a friend, which is understandable. I'd never really lost anybody, so it was all new to me. And then got medication to antidepressants, and I was on a level where I was able to function again. You know, wasn't as angry, wasn't as frustrated. I was able to think properly. And then about a year later, had a friend pass away here in Australia.
Oh wow!
Again, like out of the blue, overnight. Both of these lads had 2 young kids like me, exact same ages. So that triggered my mental health again. Back on medication, but this time it was almost like it ramped up. Like I just couldn't think straight. Just everything just felt like I call it the grey, because at the time it just felt like there was like a mist.
Just
numb. Numb. I couldn't feel anything. Like I was angry. I was aggressive.
But didn't have a lot of clarity.
No, nothing. And again, my ex-wife said to me, you know, you need to go and get this looked at. You need to go and speak to somebody again. And I did, and I got back on the medication. But then, by this time I had found personal development. So after I'd done the 10 sessions with the psychologist, I was like, I don't want to go back to the psychology. I want to look at different things. So I found personal development. So like, Tony Robbins, and like start reading books and listen to audibles. And I was like, okay, I'll go down this route. I'll better myself.
Yeah.
It also made me question what I was doing in my life with the 2 guys passing. So I was like, life's too short. Like I've just lost 2 mates.
Yeah. Yep.
I'm a tradie. I'm a site manager by this point. I'm working, anywhere from 12 to 14 hours a day, 6 days a week, missing out on my kids. This is not my Aussie dream that I came here for. So I started questioning what I was doing. I was like, I'm going to build myself up and I'll do something else. And the company that I was doing my personal development with, they asked me if I wanted to be one of their coaches. And I was like, yeah, sure, I'll give that a shot. Like if I can help somebody in, some form from what I've learned, then yeah, I'm all for that. And that's kind of what got me into this role. So I was working with just anybody, men and women of all facets of life, just helping them with their goals, as well as having my own coaches and do my own personal development. And then I kind of thought, like, I'm learning stuff here that's making me a better tradie, because I was able to, I learned some things that helped me focus and function better on site, but also at home.
So a younger audience, younger tradies, what tips or advice do you have for them to identify, things that what kind of flags that they need to identify for their own well-being?
Yeah, so one of the main ones to look for is, kind of the first signs of depression is you're not enjoying being at work.
Yep.
Struggling to get out of bed. If somebody's running late continuously, they've got, trying to drag themselves out of bed is probably one of the first ones. First indicator that something's going on for somebody. And it's not as easy as that. There's some guys who will come and they'll be full of life every day, and they're the ones who are struggling because the loudness of their mouth will quieten what's going on for them. So there's 2 extremes. You get the person who comes into themselves. Doesn't
shuts down,
goes
really
late to work. When all the rest of the boys are going for a smoke, or they kind of keep to themselves. Or
it's probably an easier one to identify on site.
Yeah,
when you see that person, because they aren't themselves. They aren't as chirpy as they usually are.
Yeah, that's normally a given that something's going on. And then for the individual themselves, it's when they're not finding enjoyment in what they're doing. And that's when there's obviously a change somewhere. And now that can be what they're doing on site, or that can be what they're doing at home. So it's really the small things that trigger it. And then there's also the terminology that some of the guys are using. So if they're constantly complaining, if they're constantly negative about work, life, what's going on with their partner, what's going on with home, like there's little things like that. If they change in their mindset and their wording and the things, they're the things to really look out for.
Yeah. I think just on the contrary to that, like we've spoken a lot about on this podcast previously about finding your passion and how important that is, where, you find something that you really enjoy, and it really just highlights how important that is to, to help offset, and a really good way to give yourself a tool. So to give yourself the best crack to, be enjoying what you're doing, and, turning up every day and looking after your mental health by doing something you enjoy and love.
It's kind of like having that light at the end of the tunnel to continue aiming for the goalposts, right? Yeah. So, and what you're talking about is having the tools to help you get to those goals, right?
Yeah. Well, it's having that. That's a perfect one, because a lot of guys right now are lost because they don't have a passion. They've got nothing that they're heading to. That. Maybe not so much the younger lads, because for them it's fresh. It's the older lads who've been in it for so long, they've lost that light, they've lost that passion. They're the ones who need to change their mindset. They need to find other goals and appreciate that they've got the job that they've got.
Yep.
So that their job might not be their main focus. They need to be looking at things outside of their life.
Yeah.
Job brings in the money so that they can do those things, whether it's holiday with their family, whether it's even escapes away themselves with their mates.
Something to look forward to, right?
Yeah, you need it.
So how important is goal setting in when you're trying to coach these people to to bring the best out of themselves?
It's huge because what it gives them, it gives them something to reach for. It gives them something to build towards.
Yep.
So it's like if you're saving for a holiday, like each week you put an X amount of money away, and in 3 months' time you're going to Bali, let's say, because I know that's where most young Aussie tradies go to. But you've got something to reach for. So that means, every day that you go into work, you're building towards that. And it might not be
more
that.
purpose, right?
Yeah, you need purpose. Like purpose is a massive one. It's all cliche of, you need to find your purpose. But also, don't be too stuck trying to find your purpose. A lot of people get really stuck on it, and then they get frustrated with themselves when they don't.
Because you're not always
especially
going to
the
hit
young
the nail
lads
on the head, pardon the pun, the first time around.
Yeah,
right. You've got to keep going and find out what works for you and what you do like.
Yep.
And it does come with a bit of trial and error, and it can be frustrating. But if you can keep going through and find that, then everything will fall into place.
Yeah, and everything is a lesson or a blessing. So if you do something and it doesn't work out, you've learnt from it.
Yeah.
If you do something and it works out, then perfect. And I know some people who have tried the trade 2 or 3 times and it doesn't work out for them, but they still have the passion for it. So then they become a handyman. They do all of it.
Yeah.
So it's not getting stuck with the one thing and then knocking yourself down when it doesn't become what it is.
Yeah.
Is it almost diagnosing sort of the root cause of things and kind of going that little bit deeper to figure out what it is you like doing and what it is that is getting you down,
yes,
or that you really don't like doing, and kind of, taking a really conscious approach to that. And, we talk a lot about finding your passion, and I think that's kind of really what is underlying all of this.
Yeah, you have to be. You have to be passionate about what you do, or then it just becomes a job. That old phrase.
Yeah, I agree with that. It's just so key.
Yeah, and if it's not what you're doing and you hate coming to work every day, then do something different.
Yeah.
Try
Make sure your ladder's leaning up against the right wall.
That's absolutely damn straight.
Before we kicked off the podcast, you spoke a little bit to us about breath work. Can you give us a little bit of insight into some of the tips and tricks that you've used and to help build your mental fitness?
Yeah, so it's something simple that we all do, like breathing. When you say breath work to people, like, oh, that's just breathing. It's like it's consciously breathing in a certain way. And the one I like is called box breathing.
Box breathing.
Box breathing. So
Tell us about box breathing.
So it's just to big it up before we start. The US Navy SEALs use this. So if it's good enough for them, it's good enough for our tradies on our website. So pretty much essentially what it is, it's stopping. And I used to do this in the car on the way to site, because I was getting anxious and I was thinking about what was coming. Had I ordered enough material? Was this trade going to turn up? Yada yada yada. And I get like tight chest, loss of breathing, and if anyone's had a panic attack, it feels just like there's the heat's just rising and you can't control, and the brain gets go. And what this does is you stop and you breathe in for 4 seconds, you hold it for 4 seconds, breathe out for 4 seconds, hold it for 4 seconds. So essentially, it's the box. Yeah. And what it does is, one, you're focusing on the 4 in your head, so you can't think on anything else.
Yep.
The breathing slows down your heart rate. It slows down your mind. It slows down the anxiety. It just slows everything down. Do this maybe 5 or 6 times. It's a simple exercise. Like I used to do this in traffic. You can do this when you're sitting on the dunny.
Great time
do
just to a coping mechanism in the moment, just to stop and just
Kind of break the cycle a little bit, break the thought pattern.
It's almost like when you have it. For me, it's like a release valve. So when you've got the pressure building up, like everything's going wrong, can't do this, you can't think clearly.
Bring some color back, bring some clarity back to that fogginess.
Yeah.
And
I used to do this in traffic on the way to work. So by the time I got to work, I was clear. I knew what was ahead for me for the day. I was able to get to site without being like this time bomb. That if anyone said anything to me, I would explode. It was relax.
That's good.
Simple, but it's so effective.
So breath work is one thing. You mentioned before about mindset and having a negative mindset. What are some of the questions that you would ask one of your clients when it comes to thinking about changing their mindset?
It's sit down and think about 3 things that you want to keep in your life, 3 things that you want to change, and 3 things that you want to add.
That's good.
So it's 3 things that you like, 3 things that you don't like, and then 3 things that you want to add.
It's nice and simple.
It's simple. And if you don't have any three things that you do like, then that's when you need to change it. So look at the things that you don't like and flip it. And it can be anything from, the amount of hours the work, the people that you have around you, even the place that you work. Like a lot of people are scared to leave their job site or leave the company because there's a, bad atmosphere.
It's hard. It's tough.
Yeah.
It's hard to, it's easy to follow the way that the water's flowing.
Well, it's kind of like the fear of the unknown also, right? I mean, you're in a job, it's somewhat
safe.
Stable.
And that's what gets a lot of people stuck. It's safe. They're happy to take all of the BS. They're happy to take all of the stuff from site, from their boss, their manager, whatever it is, because it's safe and it's comfortable, but it doesn't actually benefit you in the long run. And a lot of people are just too scared to take a risk, especially apprentices, young lads. But realistically, there's so many construction companies out there, big and small. Like, it's not hard to pick up a job. You just need to, one, be proud of yourself, own yourself. A lot of people will just slip under the radar and just, if I'm quiet, they'll leave me alone. And it doesn't benefit them. Like, you don't get, none of us do this for love, essentially. We do it for a wage so that we can provide for ourselves, our families, and a better life. And it's allowing the guys to, realize that it's okay to do something that just because another 10 lads are continue going to the pub every night. If you don't want to do it, you don't have to. Yeah, it's not like you say. It's easy to follow, but what you find is if you're one of the guys who actually does a ton something different, or they'll probably take the piss out of you. But what you'll find is they'll actually go, what is it that you're actually doing? Yep. I've had that so many times. When I told people I was starting to do life coaching and personal development, typical, oh yeah, you're going to change the world. And then literally 10 minutes later, so how does this work? What do you do? It's interesting.
It's actually like one small step at a time.
All it takes. Yeah. It's, they say that you're the power of the 5 people in your life, but you're also the power of one of the 5 in somebody else's life. Yeah. So if they see you better in yourself, cutting out, going to the servo and actually bringing in something healthy. Like, I'm not one to promote healthy eating. I love bad food as much as the next person. So I'm not going to sit here and promote. But if you're just doing an incremental change in your life,
it's still really important, and it is enough to shift the needle when you are looking after yourself, whether that be mentally or your nutrition and things like that. Yeah, and any steps that you can do to make a step in the right direction will make a difference.
1% every day.
1% every day. Yeah. That's good.
So you mentioned, we were speaking about leaving the environment or making those changes, but not everybody does have that option. Particularly people that might be in a smaller community, rural town, what have you. What advice would you have for people that are in those situations in terms of approaching that, I guess, situation?
Yeah.
What steps can they take to improve that?
The smaller towns with the smaller town mentality is very, very difficult to break. I came from one back home in Scotland, and I understand it. There's a lot of small town people who will stay in the same job, go to the same pub, they go to the same place on holiday, and it can be daunting to approach something different, but you have to look out what's best for you. What's the bigger picture? Are you going to be here in 4 years as an apprentice and stay here, or are you going to get your qualification and then head elsewhere? Whether it's go to the bigger city, whether it's go to a different country, whatever it may be. It's short term pain for long term goals.
Yeah.
Get your qualification. Head down and just get on with it. If it's bearable enough, just get your qualification so that you then can write your own ticket to go wherever you want.
Yeah. I think you got to plan out what do you want that your life to look like, or what do you want your next role to be, and then how do I get there? What do I have to do to get there, and work backwards from the steps you need to put in place to make those changes.
Yeah,
and
that's one thing that you and I have spoken about is working backwards from that goal.
Yep. And it just makes sure that it just means that you have the tools necessary under your belt to get where you want to go.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's the beauty of working back is you can break it down into smaller steps, and it doesn't feel like you're climbing a mountain.
You're trying to jump
up. Because you're just like, oh, okay, so let's just say you want to have your own business with 4 or 5 trucks, but you're just an apprentice. You're like, how the hell am I going to do that?
And it doesn't happen overnight.
No, it doesn't. And it's okay. So you work it back. It's like, what do I need to do? You get you speak to somebody who's doing it. You find out how they did it, so you get the tips and the tricks and the tools from them. But it's also someone to go to.
Yep.
Like, okay, this is the next move. What did you do? Learn from them. But breaking it, like re-engineering it and breaking it down, it means, you can tick off something each time and it's an achievement. 1 foot forward, 1 foot forward. And it may be getting your apprenticeship, and then it may be getting one guy working for you, and it may be getting like a bigger contract, and then getting one truck.
Yeah.
And then getting a lease for the second. And it's the small incrementals.
Yep.
And then when you get to the bigger one of where you're at, then it's what's the next goal.
And it wasn't as daunting as you thought it was going to be when you set out.
No, it's the small ones. And you find that some guys get there, they have the company, they have all the trucks, they have all the guys, and they're like, this actually isn't what I wanted. And then they change it.
Yep.
And that's all right.
That's okay.
And that's
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah, that's right.
Like, people kick themselves for like, oh, I got the goal that I wanted, but now it's not. It's like, yeah, because you have grown along the way. You've learnt things.
But then at that point in time, it's about looking ahead and resetting a new goal.
Exact same. Yeah.
Isn't it?
Yeah.
So when we were speaking before the show, you mentioned a tool that you like to impart on people that you do coach and talk to.
Yep.
And it was a 3-step process. Can you tell us a little bit about it?
Yeah, so I kept it nice and simple for our tradies because they don't elaborate too much in it. But it's simple one I do with a site presentation, and it's tune in, check up, and reach out.
And what does each one of those mean?
So tune in is tune into yourself mentally and physically. So where's your headspace at? What thoughts are you thinking? Good thoughts? Are you thinking bad thoughts? Where are you at in your headspace? But also physically, like what hurts? We're tradies. We use our body. We're probably one of the only jobs that use our body 24/7 as well as tools. So what hurts? Knee sore, arms. Like tune into yourself, but then get regular checkups with the doctor. Maybe not so much the young lads, but the older lads. If there's that like niggling pain somewhere, or depending on the age of you, it could be especially cancer, dust related, all of those things. Don't be the typical man and put off
It's
like
always
not
that
going
she'll
to.
be right.
She'll be right until she's not. Like it's basic, but yeah. And then reach out to somebody who you think's changing. Like I said before, if they're running late, if their mood's changing, if you just know that they're not doing great, reach out to them and just check in with them. But also, if you yourself aren't doing great, reach out to somebody. Even if it's just a buddy on site, or if it's if you've got a employee wellness program in your company, use it. Or if it's someone like me, like reach out. But don't be afraid. Like don't keep it in. One of the main things I get is people say, when I ask the question, "Are you all right?" Where do I go from there?
Yeah.
It's like just listen.
Just
listen to what they have to say. And if it feels too big for you, if it's not, there's services, my services, there's TX, there's all these different services. But don't be afraid to ask the question just because you don't know where to go from there.
Yeah.
And
That's great advice.
it's pretty simple. Like it's nothing. There's no rocket science behind it, but it's just we need to be implementing it.
Yep. And get that conversation going.
Yep,
Tune
pretty
in,
much.
check up, reach out.
Yep.
So personal development, you've spoken like a little bit about, looking into some tools that kind of, helped you, to grow yourself. What other tools have you got for people out there who are looking to grow themselves?
One of the main things is, and it's a really drastic one, but you don't have to do this. I took the radio out of my truck so that I wasn't listening to the radio, the crap on the radio. So I listened to podcasts like this to learn from people, audibles to get education, because we live in a world full of information.
So much out there.
And not all of it's good. Not all of it's good for you. If you're selective about what you listen to and it's like fitness for your body. You wouldn't feed yourself crap when you're trying to grow. So what you fuel your body with, you fuel your mind with the same. So it's find people who are doing what you want to do.
See, that's interesting that you take the radio out of your car, but then music's so important.
Oh, I love music. I love music. Don't get me wrong.
All the talk back.
It's the news. It's the radio. It's all of the negativity that's on the radio. And it's the same with the TV. Stop watching the news. Like focus on your goals. Focus on what you want to achieve. Never mind about the house breaking.
And I guess that's something you can do. You can choose the input. And it kind of helps where you get your energy from and what kind of energy you want kind of coming in that can fuel you to direct the output that you can channel towards the goals that you want to make.
Yeah. And that's one of the basic ones. The next one is get someone to hold you accountable. So whether it's a coach like myself or a mentor or someone who you look up to.
Your support network around you.
Yeah, you need someone so that when you're not having the best of the day or you're struggling with something, you can go to them and say, hey, what would you do in this situation? Or this is how I'm feeling. Or this is, I'm doing it. You would go to your journeyman on site to ask them how would you swing a door or how would you plumb something in. It's the exact same with like life goals and personal development. Find someone who is in a position where you want to be and leverage them, learn from them.
So just on the finding someone to do that, I think, there are people out there that really don't have many friends or family that might feel a little bit isolated. And I think, is that where services like, Coach Huey comes in?
Yeah. And
like there is always somewhere to turn.
There's always somewhere to turn. And it's we live in an information world. You just need to Google someone to find them. And it's not being scared to reach out to them.
Yeah.
Like that's the first step. Like a lot of people will watch from the shadows and see what you're doing, but it's actually just message someone.
And that's probably the hardest step too, right?
But it's the hardest and the most simplest. Like it's just that, like, a simple conversation can change your life. It can change your world. And it's most people who are successful or most people who are working on themselves won't belittle someone who's trying to do the same.
Yeah,
like
that's good.
That phrase that I saw it the other day. It's like a billionaire won't belittle you for trying to be a billionaire, or a bodybuilder won't belittle you for trying to be a bodybuilder. It's always someone who's got less than you who belittles you.
And you got to start somewhere.
Yeah, you have to. Everyone starts somewhere. Like Jeff Bezos and all the Elon Musk. They didn't start with money. Like they didn't start where they were. They had to start day one. And it's the same with everyone and anyone. We're all human.
Yep.
Like we'll put people on a pedestal of, they're like, I can't speak to them because they've got 1,000 followers on Instagram, or they've got this multi-dollar business. They started just like we did. Like some people were born with a silver spoon, but I mean that's a different. It's a different story. Yeah. But no, just reaching out to somebody and shooting them a message. And if they're genuinely out there to help, they'll reach back to you.
Yeah. Aaron, that's been great. Like kind of coming in and hearing your story there, and providing us with those tips and tricks for what we can do and what we need to be looking out for as well. We have spoken quite a little bit about mental health, but if you are struggling out there, reach out to the people around you. Reach out to there are plenty of resources available, and we'll put some in the show notes there, so they'll be accessible. But yeah, thank you very much for tuning in for this one.
That's about all we've got time for on the show today. Thank you, Coach Huey, for joining us.
Yeah, thanks, mate, for your time. That's been a great one.
Appreciate it.
Whereabouts can our listeners find you?
Yeah, so best place is Instagram. So Aaron WD Huey, or Coach to the Tradies. LinkedIn for kind of business type things. And then I have a website as well, so hustletalkcoaching.com, and there's a few services on there. You can reach out to me there, and also book in some presentations and sessions together. So yeah, don't be afraid to reach out. I'm always open to chat, whether it's just a chat or we work further from there.
Yep.
If I can give 1% of what I've learned to somebody to help them, I'm all for it.
Beauty.
That's great. Thank you very much.
Awesome. Thank you so much. No, so that's been another episode of the Built Different podcast. Don't forget to subscribe so that you don't miss an episode, and give us a follow on Instagram as well so you can catch up on the latest clips.
That's at Built Different Australia.
So that's been another episode of the Built Different podcast, the podcast for tradies that are
Built different.